It was a typical October morning when the sound of tires crunching on gravel pulled me away from my reading. Through the porch window, I spotted a black sedan stopping right in front of the house my parents built 50 years ago. Two men got out of the car, both wearing dark blue uniforms with vests that had the letters HOA in bright yellow. I put my book aside and walked to the door. The older one, bald and wearing mirrored sunglasses, smiled in a way that never reached his eyes. The other man, skinny and stiff in his posture, held a clipboard like it was a shield. "Mr. Coleman? Michael Coleman?" the bald man asked. "Yeah, that's me. Dawson, from Pine Ridge HOA. This is Wilson," he said, nodding toward the clipboard guy. "We're here because your property is violating several of the association's rules." I frowned, confused. There must be some mistake. This property isn't part of any HOA. Wilson flipped through some papers on his clipboard. "According to our records, this area was incorporated into Pine Ridge HOA 3 months ago. We've received complaints about the condition of your entrance, that irregular wooden fence and," he pointed at the barn, "that unapproved structure. That makes no sense. I've lived here for years. I inherited this house from my parents. There was never any homeowners association around here." Dawson stepped forward, invading my space. "Well, now there is, Mr. Coleman. And your fines already add up to $2,300. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this." "I'm not paying any fine for rules I never agreed to follow," I said, feeling my face warm up. "You can't just show up and declare that my property belongs to an association." Dawson kept that unsettling smile while Wilson pulled a document from his clipboard. "This is the official notice. We need you to sign it to confirm receipt," said Wilson, extending the clipboard. I took the paper, examining the nicely printed header of the Pine Ridge HOA. The document listed absurd violations: non-standard fence, visible utility vehicles, unauthorized construction. "This is ridiculous. I'm not signing anything. Failure to comply will result in additional fines," Wilson warned, "and eventually, legal action." "Do you have any identification besides those vests?" I asked suspiciously. Dawson sighed theatrically and pulled out a wallet. He quickly showed a laminated card that I could barely read. "Look, sir, we're not here to argue. We're here to inform you. You have 72 hours to start fixing things, or you'll face consequences. Get off my property, now." "That's an error, Mr. Coleman," Dawson said, taking a couple of steps back. "We'll be back tomorrow with complete documentation. I suggest you rethink your position." I watched them get back into the car, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Something was off. Really off. As soon as the black sedan disappeared down the road, I went back inside and grabbed my phone. I first called the county recorder's office. "No, sir. There's no Pine Ridge HOA registered in this area," the receptionist said after a few minutes of checking. "In fact, your property is in a rural zone that doesn't allow homeowners associations without unanimous approval from the residents." I hung up and immediately searched for Pine Ridge HOA on my computer. Not a single relevant result popped up. No website, no address, nothing. I found the card of a real estate lawyer who had helped me years ago and gave him a call. "Michael, this sounds like a scam we've been seeing lately," he explained after I told him what had happened. "People posing as authorities from non-existent associations to intimidate property owners. They usually target valuable properties or strategic land plots." I remembered that a luxury resort was buying land in the area. My 2-acre lot was located right between the resort and the lake. What should I do if they come back? Don't sign anything. Ask for official documentation registered with the county. And if they persist, call the police. After hanging up, I rummaged through a drawer until I found Sheriff Thompson's card. It'd be good to have on hand. Barely had the sun risen when the roar of a big engine woke me up. I ran to the window and saw an alarming sight. Yesterday's black sedan was now accompanied by a pickup truck and a small excavator. I quickly got dressed and ran outside to the yard. Dawson was supervising as 2 men unloaded the excavator. "What do you think you're doing?" I yelled, hurrying toward them. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman. As we informed you, your entrance doesn't meet HOA standards. We're here to start the necessary corrections." "You're not authorized to touch anything on my property." The excavator started up, its engine drowning out my voice. Wilson approached with another document. "Here's the remediation order. The HOA has the authority to make corrections when the owner refuses." Before I could respond, the excavator advanced on my gravel driveway, scooping up a load of stones and dirt. "Stop this now," I ordered, positioning myself in front of the machine. The operator glanced over at Dawson, who signaled him to continue. The machine maneuvered around me, destroying more of the driveway. I ran back inside to grab my cell phone. Wilson shouted after me, "This is only going to make things worse, Mr. Coleman. The costs will be added to your association debt." That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with overzealous bureaucrats. I was being targeted by scammers intentionally trying to take over my property. With trembling hands, I dialed Scott's number. We knew each other from college, and after his stint with the Marines, he had moved to a cabin less than 15 minutes away. "Scott, I need help. It's urgent." I quickly explained the situation while watching through the window. The excavator had already destroyed half of my driveway. "I'm on my way. Don't confront those guys," Scott replied, his calm voice contrasting with my anxiety. While I waited, I grabbed my shotgun from the closet. I wasn't planning on using it, but I wanted them to know I wasn't defenseless. 12 minutes later, I saw Scott's truck pulling up discreetly among the trees, out of the intruder's sight. He came up to the back of the property, carrying a long bag. "Do you still have that room in the attic overlooking the entrance?" he asked after a quick hug. "Yeah. Perfect. Michael, these guys aren't from any HOA. They're scammers trying to bully you off your property. I've seen this play before." Why, Scott opened his bag to reveal a rifle with a telescopic sight. "We're not going to shoot anyone," he explained, noticing my expression. "But we're going to make it clear you're not alone. I'll position myself up there. You go out and talk to them. If things escalate, I'll give a signal they won't ignore." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "And then we call the sheriff. But first, let's make sure they leave your property." I left the house with firm steps, adrenaline rushing through my veins. The excavator kept demolishing my driveway, turning it into a muddy trench. Dawson was smiling as he talked with two men I hadn't seen before. Reinforcements, no doubt. Wilson stayed by the car, scribbling on his clipboard. "You've got exactly 2 minutes to shut down that machine and leave my property," I announced, my voice firmer than I felt inside. Dawson slowly turned around, that arrogant smile still plastered on his face. "Mr. Coleman, I'm afraid you don't understand your position. We're not asking for permission. I found out there's no Pine Ridge HOA registered in this county," I replied. "I also learned that this area doesn't allow HOAs without unanimous approval from the owners. What you're doing is trespassing and destroying private property." For a moment, Dawson's smile faltered, but it soon came back. He stepped closer, stopping just a few steps from me. "Very clever, but it doesn't matter. Let's see. An old man, isolated, facing 5 of us. What do you think will happen? By the time the police get here, we could have your house flattened." He gestured to the excavator operator, who started steering the machine even closer to the house. "I'm not sure you're doing the math right," I said calmly. "I'm not alone." Dawson laughed loudly, looking around dramatically. "Oh, really? And where's your army? Hiding in the trees?" At that moment, just as we had planned, a small red dot appeared on Dawson's forehead. He didn't notice it at first, but Wilson, watching our exchange, visibly paled. "Dawson," Wilson murmured, nervously pointing to his own forehead. Slowly, understanding dawned on Dawson's face as he grasped the meaning of that red dot. His confidence crumbled in an instant, replaced by pure fear. "My guy upstairs is a former Marine sniper with 3 tours in Afghanistan," I explained calmly. "He can hit a coin-sized target from 800 meters away. You're less than 100 meters away." The excavator operator finally noticed the situation and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. That's a death threat," stammered Dawson, his arrogance completely evaporated. "It's illegal. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just letting you know that my property is protected. Besides, what's illegal is posing as an authority or not, and destroying private property." The red dot danced from Dawson's forehead to his chest, and then to each of the other men one by one, serving as a silent reminder that in a single second, their lives could be brutally ended by a man they couldn't even see. "You've got 2 options," I continued. "Either you get back in your vehicles and leave now, or I'll call Sheriff Thompson and explain how I caught intruders wrecking my property. I'm sure he'd be very interested in checking out your backgrounds." Wilson was already moving toward the car. "Dawson, let's go. It's not worth it." For the first time, I saw genuine hatred in Dawson's eyes. "You don't know who you're messing with, old man." "No, you don't know who you're messing with," I shot back. "I've got your names, your vehicle's plates, and video evidence of this invasion. If any of you set foot on my property again, the consequences will be immediate." The red dot reappeared on Dawson's forehead, resting there like a silent exclamation mark. Dawson finally relented, making a brusque gesture to his men. "Load up the equipment. Let's go." I watched as they loaded the excavator back onto the trailer, Dawson throwing furious glares my way every few seconds while nervously touching his forehead. "This isn't over, Coleman," he threatened as he got into the car. "For your sake, I hope it is," I replied. As the vehicles left through the wrecked entrance of my property, I felt a mix of relief and unease. I had won this battle, but something told me the war was just beginning. Scott got down from the attic a few minutes later, the rifle now dismantled and safely stowed in its bag. "They're amateurs," he commented, watching the dust still hanging in the air on the road. "Professionals would have scoped out the perimeter before launching an operation like this. Amateurs or not, they ruined my driveway and will probably come back with reinforcements." Scott nodded gravely. "It's time to call the authorities." After Dawson and his men rushed off, Scott and I meticulously documented the damage. We took photos of the destroyed driveway, the machine's tire marks, and even picked up business cards that Wilson had dropped in his haste. "Sheriff Thompson," I said into the phone after finally getting him on the line. "Michael Coleman here. I have a situation on my property that needs your attention." I quickly explained the events of the last 2 days, from the first visit by those fake HOA agents to the recent confrontation. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, the sheriff replied, his voice conveying an urgency that surprised me. "Don't touch anything until I get there." Scott and I waited on the porch, on high alert in case Dawson decided to return. To my surprise, it wasn't just one police car that showed up, but 3. Sheriff Thompson stepped out of the first vehicle, flanked by 4 deputies who immediately started checking out the property. "Michael," the sheriff greeted me with a firm handshake. He nodded at Scott, whom he knew from previous encounters. "You said they identified themselves as representatives of a Pine Ridge HOA, right?" "Exactly. They had cards, official-looking documents, uniforms. Everything seemed legit at first glance." Thompson shook his head. "We've been after these guys for months. They operated in 2 neighboring counties under different names. Lakeside HOA in Garfield County and Mountain View Association in Monroe." My stomach sank. "So, I'm not the first victim?" "Far from it. They've forced 3 elderly homeowners to sell for a fraction of the value, and they've bullied a dozen more." The sheriff pointed to the business cards we'd collected. "Can I take these as evidence?" "Sure. I also have photos of them wrecking the entrance." "Perfect. Michael, do you have any idea why they chose your property?" Scott answered before I could. "His land connects the Pinehurst Lake Resort to the direct lake access. They were probably working for some developer." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully as one of the deputies approached him. "Sir, we found clear fingerprints on the abandoned excavator, and we've matched the license plates on the vehicles described by Mr. Coleman." "Excellent," Thompson replied, turning back to me. "We're going to need your formal statement at the department, and you might want to consider additional legal actions, restraining orders, a lawsuit for damages." "Do you think they'll come back?" I asked. The sheriff's gaze hardened. "Dawson isn't known for backing down. He has previous records for fraud, forgery, and even assault. Wilson is more cautious, but just as dangerous." One of the deputies urgently approached Thompson with a radio. The sheriff listened for a moment, his face lighting up with evident satisfaction. "It looks like our guys just got pulled over on the state highway," he announced. "They had forged documents, unauthorized police uniforms, and, surprisingly, detailed blueprints of your property, Michael." "Are you going to arrest them?" I asked, a wave of relief washing over me. "They're already in custody. We have warrants out for both of them. They won't be out anytime soon." Scott put his hand on my shoulder. "See? Sometimes the system works." I spent the next 2 hours giving my formal statement, first right there on the property, and then at the county jail. With every new detail I shared, the case against Dawson and Wilson grew stronger. At the end of the day, I watched from the waiting room window as the 2 were led into the police station, handcuffed and escorted by deputies. Dawson looked up and caught my eye. Even in that situation, he managed a confident smile, as if he knew something I didn't. "Don't worry about him," Sheriff Thompson said, noticing my unease. "Wherever he's going, he won't be bothering anyone for a long time." "I sure hope you're right," I replied, unable to shake the persistent feeling that this wasn't really over. Before leaving the station, the county lawyer stopped by to discuss the case. "Mr. Coleman, we've got enough evidence to keep them locked up for a while. Document forgery, fraud, property damage, impersonating an authority." He glanced at his notes. "But we need you to stay strong as a witness. They have connections." "What kind of connections?" "The kind that hire expensive lawyers and find loopholes. They've gotten away with charges before." He lowered his voice. "They work for someone with resources and influence. We don't know exactly who yet, but we suspect one of the developers buying up land in the area. I nodded slowly, the pieces coming together. So, what should I do now? Live your life normally, but stay vigilant. Install cameras if you can. Report any suspicious activity right away. He handed me his card. And call me if you need anything. The following days were surprisingly quiet. I hired a crew to repair my driveway, set up security cameras at key spots around the property, and even considered Scott's suggestion of getting a dog. A week after the incident, I got a call from Sheriff Thompson. Good news, Michael. The judge has denied bail for Dawson and Wilson. They'll remain in custody until trial. That's a relief, I answered sincerely. There's more. During the investigation, we found documents linking them to at least 6 other similar cases. It seems they're part of a larger operation to acquire strategic land for some kind of development. Did they find out who they really work for? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not officially yet, but we're following some promising leads. After hanging up, I walked out onto the porch to take in my property. The afternoon sun bathed the 2 acres of land my parents had bought decades ago. The barn needed a new coat of paint. The fence had several spots needing repair, but it was my home. Scott showed up at the end of the day, bringing a bottle of whiskey and some extra news he'd collected through his contacts. Pinehurst Development Corporation, he revealed as we poured our drinks. They were behind Dawson and Wilson. They've been buying up all the properties around the lake to build a luxury resort. Your land is the only thing blocking direct access to the most valuable part of the shore. How'd you find that out? I've got a friend at the real estate records department. Every property that Dawson and Wilson convinced owners to sell ended up in Pinehurst's hands through shell companies. I mulled over the information as we watched the sunset through the trees. Do you think it's really over? Scott took a sip of whiskey before replying. Dawson and Wilson are out of the picture, at least for now. But guys like them are just disposable pieces. The real players rarely show themselves. The next morning, I received an official letter from the district attorney's office, asking for my cooperation as a key witness in the case against Dawson and Wilson. Enclosed was a preliminary report detailing the crimes they'd been charged with and the evidence collected. I also got an unexpected surprise, an offer to buy my property at a price well above market value. The envelope had the discreet logo of Pinehurst Development Corporation. No threats, no intimidation, just a legitimate business offer accompanied by a politely worded letter signed by the company's CEO. I showed the documents to Scott when he dropped by to check on me. Smart move, he remarked, examining the offer. Now that their aggressive tactic failed, they're trying the friendly approach. The price is tempting. Really tempting, I admitted. Almost 3 times what the property would normally be worth. And what are you going to do? I looked out the window at the old oak tree where my dad had built a treehouse for me when I was a kid, at the lake where I'd learned to fish, at the memories embedded in every inch of this place. I'm going to politely decline, I replied. This place isn't for sale, not for any amount of money. Scott smiled and raised his glass in a silent toast. In the weeks that followed, life slowly got back to normal. I attended preparatory meetings with the prosecutor, reviewed my testimony and the evidence we'd gathered. Neighbors, many of whom I barely knew, began approaching me and sharing similar stories of intimidation and aggressive buyout offers. We formed an informal neighborhood watch group to alert each other of any suspicious activity. The case against Dawson and Wilson moved steadily forward. The county lawyer called weekly with updates, growing increasingly confident about a conviction. Apparently, after realizing the strength of the evidence against them, Wilson had started considering a deal to testify against Dawson and the masterminds behind the scam. A month after the incident, I got word that Wilson had accepted the deal and was providing damning details about the entire operation. Dawson, refusing to cooperate, would face everything the charges brought. The trial is set to begin in about 3 months, Sheriff Thompson told me during a visit to check on the security system I had installed. With Wilson's testimony, we're confident that Dawson will get a severe sentence. And what about Pinehurst? The sheriff sighed. That's way more complicated. Corporations have layers of legal protection. The CEO is claiming he didn't know about what went down, calling Dawson and Wilson independent contractors who went beyond their instructions. You believe that? Not for a second, but proving it is another story. As the trial date drew closer, I noticed a gradual decline in Pinehurst's interest in my property. I stopped getting offers, no further contact, almost as if they'd decided to change their strategy or target. Still, I kept my guard up. The cameras kept running, I double-checked and reinforced my fences, and Scott popped by regularly to make sure everything was in order. On the day Dawson and Wilson were formally indicted by a grand jury, I felt that one chapter was finally closing. Justice was taking its slow but steady course. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. Autumn gave way to winter, and Dawson's trial finally began. Sitting in the courtroom, I watched the man who had tried to intimidate me months before. Without his arrogant smile and mirrored sunglasses, he looked smaller, less menacing. Our eyes met briefly as I gave my testimony, and I noticed something unsettling. Despite his desperate circumstances, there was an underlying confidence in his eyes. The trial went on for 2 weeks. Wilson, holding up his end of the deal, testified in detail about the scam, partially implicating Pinehurst executives, always careful to suggest that the more aggressive actions were unauthorized moves by Dawson. In the end, Dawson was found guilty on all charges. 6 years in prison with no chance of parole for the first 3. Wilson got a suspended sentence and 2 years of probation in exchange for his cooperation. "We did it, Michael," said the prosecutor after the verdict was announced. "Justice has been served." I nodded in agreement, though something still bothered me. While the officers were taking Dawson away, he turned to me with a serene, almost satisfied smile and quietly said, "See you around," as if his sentencing was only the beginning of a much darker nightmare. I mentioned it to Scott during our little celebration that night. "I don't like that," Scott said, frowning. "Guys like Dawson always have a plan B." "But he's going to be in prison for years," I argued. "What can he do from there?" Scott set his glass down. "It's not what he can do. It's who he knows that might do things for him. Never underestimate the loyalty that money can buy." His words stuck with me in the days that followed. To put my mind at ease, I threw myself into long put-off projects around the property. I painted the barn, fixed up the fence, and even started planning a small garden for the spring. 3 weeks after the trial, I received a letter. No return address, just my name and address written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a plain white card with the words, "Properties like yours are never really safe, only temporarily protected." I showed the card to Sheriff Thompson, who promised to look into it, though we both knew how hard it would be to trace its origin. "Keep your eyes open, Michael," he advised. "I don't want to alarm you, but people with money and power seldom accept defeat lightly." A month later, I noticed subtle changes around the area. New private property signs started popping up on neighboring lands. Unfamiliar vehicles would occasionally cruise slowly down the road. One afternoon, I even spotted unauthorized topographic markings along my property line. "They're planning something," Scott commented after checking the markings. "They haven't given up on your land. They've just changed tactics." On a February morning, Sheriff Thompson showed up unexpectedly at my door. "Michael, I thought you should know in person. Dawson died in prison last night." "Died? How?" "Officially, it was a heart attack. But—" Thompson hesitated. "But what?" "It was too convenient. No witnesses, no cameras working at the time." He lowered his voice. "I have contacts in the prison system. They say he was about to revise his plea deal, offering more information on his bosses in exchange for a reduced sentence." A chill ran down my spine. "You think that—" "I'm not saying anything officially," Thompson interrupted. "I just came by to let you know that with Dawson out of the picture, all direct ties to Pinehurst have effectively been cut." After the sheriff left, I walked to the edge of my property, looking out over the lands now owned by Pinehurst Development. Construction crews were already beginning the initial phase of the resort, and I could hear the distant rumble of heavy machinery. Scott called later that night after hearing about Dawson's death. "You need to decide something important, Michael," he said bluntly. "How much time and energy are you willing to put into this fight?" "It's not a matter of time or energy," I replied. "It's a matter of principle. This land isn't for sale. Principles are noble, but be careful. Unlike Dawson and Wilson, the real adversaries are still lurking in the shadows, patient and with virtually unlimited resources." The next morning, while I was having coffee on the porch, I watched an unfamiliar car pull up to the newly repaired entrance. A well-dressed woman in a dark gray suit got out carrying a folder. "Mr. Coleman," she called. "Emily Harrington, representative of Pinehurst Development. I'd just like a few minutes of your time." I observed her approach, noticing the subtle differences in this new approach. No blatant intimidation, no fake uniforms, just professional business and polite smiles. Still, the intent was the same. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington," I said calmly, "but as I've already told your company, this property is not for sale, not for any price." Her smile faltered just for an instant. "Mr. Coleman, I can assure you our new proposal is substantially different from previous ones. Maybe you could at least listen before deciding?" I got up from my chair and looked her square in the eyes. The answer is still no, and it always will be. As she walked back to her car, I realized that wouldn't be her last visit. Dawson might be gone, Wilson might be out of the picture, but the real people interested in my land were still determined. I went inside, grabbed the phone, and dialed Scott's number. "We're gonna need a better plan," I said when he answered. "They're back. They never really left," Scott replied dryly. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. And Michael, this time, be ready for a long war." I hung up and looked out the window at the property my family had owned for generations. The morning sun illuminated the old oak tree, the freshly painted fence, and the red barn set against the green countryside. Some places are worth protecting, no matter the cost. This is one of them, and I was prepared to defend every inch of it for as long as it took. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this.